This program was made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you. Welcome to this installment of BSO Backstage, a concert preview. I'm your host, Desiree Duncan, and I'm joined with Dan Allcott.
Nice to be here again.
Good to see you.
For the 52nd season of the Bryan Symphony Orchestra. It's not the 52nd season of BSO Backstage, but...
Yes, because we've not been around that long, but yes, we're in our 17th season of BSO Backstage. Well, I know it's had a couple of different lives before. It was, what is it, Preludes and Coffee?
Prelude and Coffee. And now we're back at Poets.
We are
on
back
the Square,
at Poets.
which we bounced around town, but when I first came to Cookville, this is where we taped also.
Yeah, and they've had a lot of changes here, renovations, changing of the menu, so it's been really good. And what's that you're eating?
I'm eating a delicious blueberry scone. It's so good. So.
But yeah, it's good to be back in a familiar space. Mm-hmm. So, we're in our 52nd season of the Symphony Orchestra, so what is in store?
This is an exciting time of the year for me all the time. We just had our free concert to kind of inaugurate our season, which was a great success. It's supposed to be the free outdoor concert, but we had to move it inside because of inclement weather, which is kind of a mixed bag. We love to be at Dogwood Park, and so many of the people who are essentially a part of our organization helped to raise a lot of the money for the pavilion at Dogwood Park. And that concert is sponsored by Sam and Diane Glasgow. So it's disappointing not to be in the park, but people who are parents of young children often tell me when that concert is moved inside, it's actually more exciting for their children because they're really focused on the orchestra. And whereas if you're in the park, there's a lot to do, and you're far enough away that it's a park-like atmosphere. Now when we're at the park, we usually have around 1,700 to 2,000 people, and if we had 2,000 people in Bryan Fine Arts Center, it would be dangerous, I think.
And very, very uncomfortable.
Right. So we had about 600 people. We only have 500 seats, but we had a great concert. And like I said, the most fun about that concert for me is to somehow engage the young children. And Diane Glasgow does a great job. She had the Cookville High School Interact students there before the concert, and we had, I think, 6 or 8 tables of activities for young people, and we were featuring some music from the movie Frozen, so we had a lot of fanciful costuming and craft activities, and the kids actually got to make little sleigh bell bracelets, which I incorporated into the concert. Anytime there was, because we have a sleigh bell that the percussion section uses, so anytime that person was using that sleigh bell, the kids were encouraged to ring their own sleigh bells. That was a lot of fun. Then we had the kids come up on stage to help lead the clapping for the Radetzky March, and that's great. Really fun to have them. In fact, I even had some kids come all the way onto the podium because that looked like the best place to sit. I was encouraging them to sit on the front of the apron of the stage, but one little girl said, "Is it okay if I sit here?" And then
do they get prior training, or are you training them right there on the spot?
The kids are great. They follow conductors as well as anybody. So I showed them. We had a little practice right on stage at the beginning. Their dynamics were excellent. They clapped loud. They clapped soft. But it was really fun. And that is a very charmed situation for the orchestras too, because we're all working hard. It's a long day getting ready for that concert, and to have the energy and smiles of all those kids and the excitement of having those kids sitting literally the kids have no fear, so they sit right up into the orchestra. It's really fun for us. And then we ended the concert with the performance of the 1812 Overture. And Sam Glasgow had actually won at an auction the opportunity to play the orchestra bells at the end, so that at the end, when it sounds as it's supposed to sound, like the cacophony of church bells ringing all over the place, we actually loaded up 2 sets of orchestra bells, put Sam on the highest platform we could behind the orchestra, and he got to bang away with hammers for several minutes, and that was really fun. So for me, that's a great concert and a lot of togetherness and community involvement.
That is definitely one of the highlights of the year, especially going into the fall, is the outdoor concert for the Symphony Orchestra. Where did that tradition start?
Well, I think it really started with the Glasgows because Sam, support this concert in honor of their parents, but Sam's parents had really been crucial, I believe, in involving him in live music. And in fact, when I first came here, the first year, our brochure featured a picture that had a picture of, I think it was Sam sitting with his parents at an outdoor concert. So they were integral in getting that started with the symphony, and very involved in the development of the pavilion in Dogwood Park, so that we could have a lot of live music. And now, you know, there's not a week in the summer that goes by where there's not one or two concerts down there. So it's a great, great venue. And I've been really happy to see the park as a whole develop. The pavilion kind of came first, and then there was the next stage of development of the park. And now it's just, I mean, it's the best green space in Cookeville. I mean, it's so wonderful.
It is, especially with the development of that amphitheater, with the stadium-style seating, with
Right.
that really makes a difference. As well as, like you said, there's so many things that are going on there in the park. You've got music, of course. Also, movies in the park are happening on Thursdays and Saturday
Shakespeare
nights.
in the park.
Shakespeare in the park. And then for the first time, WCTE is having their Blues and Brews
Right. I'm
craft beer
excited about
festival
that.
there. So it just really opens up the possibilities of activities going on in Cookeville.
Right, bowling that and making, like you said, like the amphitheater. When we perform there, the symphony, we don't use any amplification in the park, only the PA system, so people can hear me talk. But it's just a wonderful experience. So I think I've done 12 concerts, free concerts with the Bryan Symphony. I think 3 of them have been inside. But so that's actually pretty good odds. It just seems like the last 4 years, I think we've done 2 or 3 in there. So I look forward to being in the park again next year.
Yeah, me too. So what are you most excited about for this upcoming season?
Well, it's hard to say because people always ask me who my favorite composer is, and I usually say whoever I'm working on, you know, that week or whatever I'm studying. But we are going to open our season with a very exciting concert of all Brahms, which I don't like to do all anybody concerts. I like to mix it up. But in this particular case, it's fun because one of the works is a solo work, and they're his 2 last orchestral works, and it's great to hear. We like to play a big symphonic work at the beginning of the season because I always say it's kind of like, you know, taking people for a test drive in a fancy car. It's like, here's what we can do with this great orchestra. And then we have a couple interesting soloists and collaborations. We will have pianist Shigeo Nariki, who's a very famous Japanese pianist who I am acquainted with, is going to come and play a Beethoven concerto in November. In March, we are collaborating with Tennessee Tech's Center Stage. Center Stage is a student-funded performance series, and we have people come in, artists, lecturers, musicians. And so we have a string quartet, the Cypress String Quartet. They're coming in, they're doing a Thursday night string quartet concert. And then they've had a work written for them that's for string quartet and string orchestra. So they'll not only play a concert on Thursday night, presented by Tennessee Tech Center Stage, but then they'll come back and play with the Bryan Symphony on Sunday. That'll be a really unique thing. And I think probably there's never been a string quartet concerto happen with our orchestra before. And then at the end of the season, we'll collaborate with the master singers to do a large choral work. So for me, you know, I spend most of my summer kind of studying and getting ready. All the planning has been done. I mean, right now I'm planning next season. So it's great because I've been studying the music and getting ready myself, and now I get to rehearse it and get going. So I'm always just so excited for whatever is in front of me. Like last month, what was in front of me was Frozen because I hadn't seen the movie, so I had to.
Like, what is this?
I had to learn a little bit about it. I knew about the hype, and I knew that everybody was excited about it, and so for me that was a new fun thing to do. So whatever I'm working on is usually what I'm most enthusiastic about. I try not to program things that I'm not enthusiastic about.
Well, that really helps.
It's good.
Well, I'm excited to learn more about what's coming up for this next concert, but we'll take a little break here, and we'll be back with more BSO Backstage, a concert preview. And now we're joined with Donna Simpson, the board president for the Bryan Symphony Orchestra. Welcome, Donna.
Well, thank you, Desiree. It's good to be here.
Good to see you. So how long have you been involved with the symphony?
For so many years, I can't tell you right now. I have been on the board, though, for the past 6 years. This makes my 7th year. I've served as secretary of the board and vice president of the board and now president of the board. And so I've been very active with the organization for the last 6 years.
And what makes you feel so passionate about the symphony orchestra?
Well, first of all, it's just a first-class orchestra located in my home area of Middle Tennessee, and it's so wonderful to have an opportunity to hear such fine music in this area. I have a broad range of musical interests, from bluegrass to gospel to blues to classical, and to have this symphony here that can provide that kind of music for us without having to leave the area is just wonderful. And it so helps enhance this community and its cultural life. That's what is most attractive to me.
That was wonderfully said.
With the coming of the 52nd season, what are you most excited about?
Well, I always love the soloists who come in. Dan does such a wonderful job. He has connections. It's amazing to me how many connections he has, and brings in folks who can perform for us the same as they perform at the Carnegie at a price we can afford. I'm excited about that, about the pianist who's coming in October. November.
November.
In November.
Shigeo Nariki's coming. And Nariki's an interesting case because he mostly performs in Japan. But I know him, and he lives in America. And so and also because our rehearsal schedule is rather compact. That's the most positive thing I can say about it. That he can come in for a weekend, and we get this world-class soloist who's really also a niche artist. There will be a lot of pianists from around here who don't get a chance to hear him, so that'll be exciting. And it's fun to bring in somebody that you kind of have to come to all the concerts, because you're only gonna get one chance to see that kind of person. So.
To me, what's cool and most rewarding about being a board member of something that's completely out of your element is that you get to learn more about a totally different discipline, I guess you could say. What are some of the things that you've picked up on that you would have never thought something you'd have to deal with an orchestra?
With an orchestra? Well, just learning about how all the backstage works in that kind of performance. I have never done any performing outside of my high school performances, and that has really been the newest thing for me. I listen to music and try to listen very carefully, and I've had some ability to do that all along, but really just being right down there and having a first-hand look at it has been very different for me and rewarding.
And something that's also exciting that Bryan Symphony Orchestra does is that you'll have different socials that Friday before the event. And then, of course, there's the availability for seeing the art that's, I don't know if you're doing that again
Yeah,
this
the
year.
Derryberry Gallery is going to be open before our concerts. We also have Catherine Godis gives a pre-concert lecture. We're not having a social for our first concert. We'll have one in November, but we're having dinner after the concert at Mauricio's. So one of the elements for me that's fun is, and even for soloists, we actually don't have a very hard, when somebody comes here as a soloist, it's easy to bring them back because they have such a good time and they feel so connected to the community because of the events that you're talking about. And for me to see, especially like I look down, I bow, politely, and I see people I know in the front row or whatever, looking at my feet, and then to be able to talk to them about music and bring them closer to the process, I think that's unique to an orchestra in a community of this size. It's really fun.
Definitely, that accessibility to people is what is really awesome about the Abercumberland that I've experienced. That, you could be at your local coffee shop, your local restaurant, and you'll run into someone that's on the city council, someone that's, the maestro for the local symphony orchestra, and you could have a conversation with them and just kind of get to know them and maybe get some behind-the-scenes information. Is that something that you've experienced as well?
Well, for sure. And from the soloists who come from away from here to the very talented musicians who are in our own symphony. I mean, just go to Google and Google any of our major players in the symphony, and you will be amazed at the wealth of experience they have. And to, you know, I'm sitting next to these folks on the board, and they're working, you know, in conjunction with me. It's very exciting.
Now, last year, you all were on the tour for the Art Prowl. Is that going to happen again this year?
We didn't line up with the same dates this year, but we definitely try to be a great art partner in this community. And that's, you know, art is like an environment. And so what we're all trying to do is make this a vibrant arts ecosystem. And arts are not necessarily competitive, so it's really fun for me. And I have friends who are involved in theater who come to the Bryan Symphony, and I go to their performances, and it's just fun to see this vital ecosystem. And it's also a delicate ecosystem, and that we're all trying to kind of foment all this activity. But I find that the more that's going on, the better it is. And so there's, you know, since I came here, one of the things I've focused on is trying to also train the next generation of music educators. And all of a sudden we have a string playing ecosystem that's just at its very delicate stages here. But we have kids who are teaching, and we have more teaching places. That's what we need to do. And what we're all doing is fomenting this very delicate ecosystem that I think WCTE is a big part of, because part of that is awareness. So that people who, especially people who are new to the community, are a little bit better about finding things out. People who've been here for a while, they seem surprised sometimes
like, that's here.
They get
really?
in a rut, you know, not, you know, because they've been here. So that's a huge part of it, and of course we really appreciate being a part of that with WCTE. That partnership is huge in fomenting the whole ecosystem.
And just the collaborations that have happened over the years. I know you've done pieces with the master singers,
which we will again at the end of the season.
Oh, good. Yeah. But I really look forward to just more collaborations. I don't know if you can get with some of the dance troupes that are in town.
We've done that also with Stage One. Yeah, it's a big thing. Collaborations are always based on, you know, timing and budgets, and that's the big thing. So whenever, like when you mentioned Art Prowl, the big thing was it could have looked like a conflict. And what we did is we made it into a collaboration, because the calendar is one of the most difficult things that we face, all of us trying to calendar things, and we don't want to be in other people's space. So when it happened last year that we had a symphony concert the same time as Art Prowl, we made a great collaboration out of it. So
and it happened just wonderfully, because Joe Bill was here.
Right, to paint a mural for us.
To paint a mural for us, and it tied in so well with the Art Prowl.
And Don, I know you have to go, but I have one question for you. What is one thing that you would like people to know about the Bryan Symphony Orchestra that maybe they don't know?
I don't know how many people know that this is an opportunity not only for the tech faculty to play here locally, but that students are brought along and are in the orchestra. And if you're not very familiar with the orchestra, you may not realize that. It's not apparent that students are on stage because they perform so well. But it is an opportunity for people, a lot primarily from this area, to come have a wonderful music education and perform with a live orchestra. It is a draw for tech, for their music professors to be able to say, as part of what I do, I get to play in an orchestra of this caliber. And I think that's one thing I want to be sure that the community knows.
Donna, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to join us. We'll take a break, and we'll be back with more BSO Backstage, a concert preview. All right, Dan, it's all Brahms all the time. Let's talk about that upcoming concert.
Well, as I said before, it's unusual for me to program a concert with music by one composer. But in this case, it's a good variety because we're featuring a concerto for violin, cello, and orchestra. It's referred to as the Brahms double concerto. And that's a really not a common occurrence in the late 19th century. And in fact, Brahms was a little reticent. He didn't play violin or cello. He was a pianist. And so he was a little reticent at the end of, this is his last orchestral work that he wrote 10 years before his death. But he wrote it for two of his friends, violinists and cellists, so he had, them to help as he was writing, to give some advice. And it's actually one of his most powerful works, and it's great. We're bringing two people who are friends of the Bryan Symphony. One, the violinist, is Dr. Chang, who's our concert master and teaches at Tennessee Tech. And the other is cellist Wesley Baldwin. Wesley teaches at the University of Tennessee. He's a very good friend of mine. As many people know, I'm a cellist, and he and I get to be cello nerds all the time together. We teach together at some festivals and stuff. And Wesley came in 2008. He played with the symphony, and he actually played the United States premiere of a concerto by a Dutch composer that I like. So both of them good friends of the symphony, and it'll be great to hear them perform this duo. This is the second time they've played this concerto together, but first time with our orchestra. And then the other work on the program is Brahms' Fourth Symphony. It's interesting to look at kind of composers. The number of symphonies that they write, it seems to be going down all the time from the 18th century. Haydn wrote 104 symphonies, Mozart wrote 41, Beethoven wrote 9, and Brahms only wrote 4. Brahms was lauded as a young man as the heir to Beethoven, and it really scared him. Unfortunately, there was a lot written about him at a young age, so it took him about 20 years from the time when somebody proclaimed him the next Beethoven until he would even publish a symphony. He's an interesting character, Brahms. I think of all the composers, he's probably the most lovable in a way, kind of a regular guy. He was from an industrial town and not from a musical family particularly. I mean, he was not well-to-do. He was from Hamburg, grew up in a port city, and just was talented. His dad was an amateur musician of sorts, but really not in the mold of like Mozart's family, who were highly trained musicians. Even Beethoven's father was a pianist and really pushed young Beethoven. Brahms came from a loving family of not great means, and they just supported him. And he eventually made his way to Vienna. And I think because he was kind of from this more colorful background, he always had fun with Viennese society, because Viennese society was very mannered in a lot of ways. So he was famous for some of the funny things he would say at parties. People would come up to him. One time a singer came up to him and said, Mr. Brahms, which one of your vocal works would you suggest that I sing? And he said, a posthumous one, meaning one that was printed only after he died, because he was making fun of her, and she didn't get the joke at all. And he was always making fun, but also of himself. And in this symphony, which is a really grand symphony, I mean, it's probably the deepest, and it's a little dark, and it reflects back to Bach. I mean, there's this whole music history that's involved in the whole thing. And somebody asked him, he would go away in the summertime to a summer retreat on a lake usually to compose. And they said, what have you been up to? He goes, oh, nothing much, just putting some waltzes and polkas together, and this is his great masterpiece. So he had a good sense of humor. He would point it at people, but he was also self-deprecating, and I think that makes him really likable. The fun thing for musicians in a Brahms symphony is that the way he wrote, you don't ever feel like you're just playing an accompaniment part. All of his parts are fun to play, and so I think you'll see the orchestra having a great time on stage. One other thing that's interesting is we think of Brahms symphonies as large works that require large orchestras. And in a sense, that's can be true. His second and third symphonies were premiered, and he often conducted the premieres with large orchestras of 100 players. But his fourth symphony was premiered with an orchestra smaller than ours, probably only 49 players. And in that case, you actually get to hear the play between the winds and the strings a little bit more. Sometimes in a really large orchestra setting, you have 20 first violins, the strings just bury everything that else is going on, except for the brass can always overpower them. But so I think it's a perfect setting, place, and way to hear this Fourth Symphony of Brahms.
Yeah, it's definitely an exciting time here in the Upper Cumberland and Cookeville, especially with everything that's going on. So these next two concerts, the one being October 5th, is very exciting. Also, again, just a reminder to the viewers that you can check out some of the work at the Joan Derryberry Art Gallery that's there beforehand. And of course, a lecture from Dr. Godis about the symphony. Dan, anything else you'd like to mention about?
No, I just would like to say a special thing, that if you are from Cookeville and you never heard the Bryan Symphony, it's time you did. We frequently, our new subscribers are people who are new to the communities, but I always want to reach out to people who are from here who have not heard us yet. I think you'll be surprised.
All right. Well, Dan, thank you so much for joining us again, and we'll see you next time on BSO Backstage, a concert preview.